What's keeping David? He should have been here by now.
It's not like him to be late.
He must have misunderstood, or he may have forgotten.
He's probably stuck in traffic. Let's give him another 10 minutes, then we can call a cab.
Well, all right, but it's not like him to be late.
He could have been held up in traffic. I'm sure he'll be here in a minute.
You're probably right, my dear. What's keeping David? He should have been here by now.
It's not like him to be late.
He must have misunderstood, or he may have forgotten.
He's probably stuck in traffic. Let's give him another 10 minutes, then we can call a cab.
Well, all right, but it's not like him to be late.
He could have been held up in traffic. I'm sure he'll be here in a minute.
You're probably right, my dear. What's keeping David? He should have been here by now.
It's not like him to be late.
He must have misunderstood, or he may have forgotten.
He's probably stuck in traffic. Let's give him another 10 minutes, then we can call a cab.
Well, all right, but it's not like him to be late.
He could have been held up in traffic. I'm sure he'll be here in a minute.
You're probably right, my dear.
I'm so sorry. I must apologize. You must be furious with me.
It's okay. We still have plenty of time to make the flight.
The traffic on Wilshire Boulevard was terrible. I should have taken 6th Street. I would have gotten here half an hour ago.
Never mind. I should have given you this earlier. Then perhaps you might have arrived on time in your new Mercedes 500 SL.
Wow. Dad, that's good of you. I really appreciate this.
Now you will have no more excuses. You'll have to arrive on time in the future.
Yes, sir. I'm so sorry. I must apologize. You must be furious with me.
It's okay. We still have plenty of time to make the flight.
The traffic on Wilshire Boulevard was terrible. I should have taken 6th Street. I would have gotten here half an hour ago.
Never mind. I should have given you this earlier. Then perhaps you might have arrived on time in your new Mercedes 500 SL.
Wow. Dad, that's good of you. I really appreciate this.
Now you will have no more excuses. You'll have to arrive on time in the future.
Yes, sir. I'm so sorry. I must apologize. You must be furious with me.
It's okay. We still have plenty of time to make the flight.
The traffic on Wilshire Boulevard was terrible. I should have taken 6th Street. I would have gotten here half an hour ago.
Never mind. I should have given you this earlier. Then perhaps you might have arrived on time in your new Mercedes 500 SL.
Wow. Dad, that's good of you. I really appreciate this.
Now you will have no more excuses. You'll have to arrive on time in the future.
Yes, sir.
Well, it's time to go now. It was lovely seeing you all again.
It was our pleasure, Mom. Thank you and Dad for being so generous.
Yes, we really appreciate everything you've done for us.
Keep well and take care of your lovely family.
I certainly will.
Mom, Dad, thanks for this. You really shouldn't have.
It was a pleasure, my boy.
Well, it's time to go now. It was lovely seeing you all again.
It was our pleasure, Mom. Thank you and Dad for being so generous.
Yes, we really appreciate everything you've done for us.
Keep well and take care of your lovely family.
I certainly will.
Mom, Dad, thanks for this. You really shouldn't have.
It was a pleasure, my boy.
Well, it's time to go now. It was lovely seeing you all again.
It was our pleasure, Mom. Thank you and Dad for being so generous.
Yes, we really appreciate everything you've done for us.
Keep well and take care of your lovely family.
I certainly will.
Mom, Dad, thanks for this. You really shouldn't have.
It was a pleasure, my boy.
Today, in Unit 1, we are going to be talking about perfect modals. Now, modals, you remember from the earlier discussions that we have had, are words like can, might, may, should, must, and so on. And certainly, you remember the perfect tenses. There is the present perfect. For example, I have seen the movie. And remember, we also discussed in Book 3 the past perfect. I had seen the movie. These are two of the perfect tenses. And what do we notice about them? Well, they both use the helper verb have. So, talking about perfect modals, we're going to see phrases like this: would have, could have, should have, must have, might have, may have. These are the phrases, the perfect modals, that we will be discussing today. Now, these are perfect modal auxiliary verbs, helper verbs. The perfect modal auxiliary verbs are used to discuss possibilities or to conjecture about a situation or event. Another word for conjecture is speculate. These are words that mean thinking about what has happened or what could have happened differently. What could have happened that caused a particular situation or event to occur. Conjecture, speculation, discussing, thinking about possibilities. When really what? We don't quite know what happened. Or we wish we had done something in a different way. If this is a little hard to understand now, let's look further. Perfect modals. I would have. I could have. Maybe. He might have. If. Perhaps. I should have. If only. She must have. None of these words and phrases are about things that happened. They are all in the mind. These perfect modals all are about situations that we think about, not things that really happened. In fact, it's our way of talking about what we wish had happened, or maybe sometimes what we wish wouldn't or won't happen. Let's look further. If only, perhaps, maybe, probably, possibly. These are all often used with the perfect modals. These words are not modals themselves, of course. The first two, if and if only, are conjunctions. The others, perhaps, maybe, probably, possibly, are adverbs. All of them are often used to indicate uncertainty. uncertainty, things we are not sure about, or to discuss how things might have been different. Might have, of course, is a perfect modal auxiliary verb. Let's look at some examples from the dialogues in this unit. So we're going to need our television here. Oh, good. Here it is. And let's view again, the dialogue that begins this unit. You will remember that in this dialogue, the Campbells, the parents of David Campbell and Donna Campbell McManus, are waiting for David to arrive to pick them up to go to the airport to catch their plane back to Washington. They are talking about David's lateness, about David not yet being there with John and Donna, who are waiting with them. Let's watch, shall we?
What's keeping David? He should have been here by now.
It's not like him to be late.
He must have misunderstood, or he may have forgotten.
He's probably stuck in traffic. Let's give him another 10 minutes, then we can call a cab.
Well, all right, but it's not like him to be late.
He could have been held up in traffic. I'm sure he'll be here in a minute.
You're probably right, my dear.
Okay, now, this time, did you notice the modal auxiliary verbs in what they were saying? Let's take a look at some of those particular things that they say that include the modal auxiliaries. Mrs. Campbell, for example, says, he should have been here by now. Should has a lot of force, right? Should, this is the way things should. Another English word that gets used here also is ought. The way things ought to have been. The way things should have been. Okay? It's now a certain time. David was supposed to be there maybe 20 minutes or 10 minutes earlier. He should have been there by then, or by now in Mrs. Campbell's situation. Okay? He was due at, let's say, 10 a.m. It's now 15 minutes past 10. He should have been there by 10 o'clock. Okay? See how that works? Now, Mr. Campbell says, well, he must have misunderstood, or he may have forgotten. Now, do you understand? He must have misunderstood. To understand is to comprehend what someone has told you. To misunderstand is to get it wrong, right? So he must have misunderstood, or else he would have been here by now. Or he may have forgotten. Okay? He must have misunderstood, or he may have forgotten. And then what does Donna say? Well, Donna, who lives in Los Angeles, after all, says he could have been held up in traffic. So Donna's theory is that maybe the traffic is so bad that David's late. Well, anybody who has either lived in or visited Los Angeles or even watched it on television may know that this is a very good possibility, right? To be held up in traffic. He could have been held up in traffic. Now, what's going on here? Well, the Campbells and Donna are speculating about what may be the reasons that David is late. Let me repeat that. The Campbells and Donna are speculating about what may be the reasons that David is late. In other words, they are trying to figure out, they're trying to understand, they're discussing what may be the reasons for something they really don't know, right? Okay. So now, what happens next? Let's go to dialogue 2, in which David actually arrives.
I'm so sorry. I must apologize. You must be furious with me.
It's okay. We still have plenty of time to make the flight.
The traffic on Wilshire Boulevard was terrible. I should have taken 6th Street. I would have gotten there half an hour ago.
Never mind. I should have given you this earlier. Then perhaps you might have arrived on time in your new Mercedes 500 SL.
Wow. Dad, that's good of you. I really appreciate this.
Now you'll have no more excuses. You'll have to arrive on time in the future.
Yes, sir.
So, now, let's take a look at some of the sentences that include the perfect modals. David says, I should have taken 6th Street. Okay, David took 6th Street. It was filled, or David didn't take 6th Street. He took what? Wilshire Boulevard, wasn't it? And Wilshire Boulevard was so crowded that we say in retrospect. In other words, looking back at, retrospect, look back at what has happened, David realizes that if he had taken 6th Street, he would have arrived on time, or he would have arrived earlier. So he says, I should have taken 6th Street. I would have gotten here half an hour ago. Okay? I should have taken 6th Street. I would have gotten here half an hour ago. Okay, now, what does Mr. Campbell say? He says, perhaps I should have given you this earlier. Perhaps I should have given you what? The envelope with the check inside, right? Perhaps, remember that's one of those words that means maybe, that's a kind of, gee, maybe, perhaps, I should have given you this earlier. And why? Then, perhaps, there's that word again, you might have arrived on time in your new Mercedes 500 SL. Okay? Perhaps I should have given you this earlier. Then, perhaps, we don't know for sure, but, you know, good chance, you might have arrived on time in your new Mercedes 500 SL. Now, of course, Mr. Campbell is also finding a kind of fun way not only to make David feel better about being late, but also to give him this wonderful present, right, with the lottery money. In this sequence, David and Mr. Campbell are talking about possible ways for David to have arrived earlier, aren't they? David and Mr. Campbell are talking about possible ways for David to have arrived earlier. So here are our two related, not entirely different, but our two ways that perfect modals can be used most effectively. Okay? And that is, they can be used either to speculate, or another word, conjecture, about things that we don't know about, or they can be used to talk about possible differences from the way things really happened. Okay? Talk about possibilities for things to have been different. Gee, I should have taken 6th Street. I would have gotten here a half an hour earlier. Hey, maybe I should have given you this earlier, then you might have arrived on time. Okay? Now, let's look again at dialogue 3. Okay. Let's watch.
Well, it's time to go now. It was lovely seeing you all again.
It was our pleasure, Mom. Thank you and Dad for being so generous.
Yes, we really appreciate everything you've done for us.
Keep well and take care of your lovely family.
I certainly will.
Mom, Dad, thanks for this. You really shouldn't have.
It was a pleasure, my boy.
Okay, did you hear that? What did David say? He said, you really shouldn't have. You really shouldn't have. Now, what does that mean? You really shouldn't have. Okay, well, let me show you. What he really is saying there is you really shouldn't, which of course is a contraction for should not, have given me this. Right. Isn't he saying you shouldn't have given me this check? Okay? You really shouldn't have done this, you know. Now, this is actually a common phrase that you'll hear people say quite frequently. Oh, you shouldn't have. It doesn't really even mean what it says, because usually people are very happy that the person did do this thing. Obviously, David, who we know from the whole story that's gone before, how much he wanted to have a new car, right? In fact, doesn't he even joke with Donna at one point about maybe they'll buy me a new car? And Donna says, oh, David, right? But the fact is that, you know, with that lottery money, Mr. Campbell is only too happy to give David the new Mercedes, to give him this nice new car. David is saying, oh, you shouldn't have, as a polite way of, you know, it's a polite thing that people do all the time. If you give someone a present on their birthday, they're obviously very pleased. We say in English, they're tickled pink. And then they go, oh, you shouldn't have. Well, really, what they're saying is, I'm so glad you did. Thank you very much. But what you shouldn't have implies is, you shouldn't have given me this. You shouldn't have done this. Now, what do we also notice here? You can use negatives with this perfect modal form, can't you? You shouldn't have. And of course, we could, we're not going to in this lesson, but we could have gone through a whole list of negatives. They mightn't have, if only they hadn't done that, they mightn't have, you know, crashed the car into the side of the mountain or whatever, right? They couldn't, or they couldn't have gone. But you can use negatives with this form, as you can also ask questions. So, now, I know that this is a difficult concept. It's hard to talk about because we're talking, as I said before, about events in the mind, aren't we? We're talking about mental events. Our human ability to think about a situation that didn't happen, rather than only being able to talk about what did happen. So let's look at some more examples of perfect modals. First of all, to discuss possibility. She might have cooked that turkey, right? She might have cooked that turkey. See, we see her delivering the turkey to what we decide must be her husband and her son. And we know that she might have cooked that turkey, but maybe someone else did, right? Might have lets us talk about a possibility that we don't know for sure. She might have cooked that turkey, but maybe someone else did, like him, the chef. Now, how about using it for speculation? Now, here's this fellow. And this is a perfect kind of way that artists depict speculating. Scratch my head. Gee, I wonder, what could have happened to my friend. Now, remember I told you we can also use this form to ask questions. Well, here's an example. What, question word, could have happened to my friend? Let's see. He could have fallen into a volcano. Oh my. Wow. He could have fallen into a volcano. Speculation about what may have happened to your friend, about what might have happened to your friend. See, a lot of these perfect modals are actually interchangeable. He could have, might have, may have fallen into a volcano. But then there's also a conjecture here. Oh, look. Then the guy sees this dinosaur and he says, he must have been eaten by that dinosaur. See that? He must have been eaten by that dinosaur. Now, must have carries a little bit more weight than might have, could have, may have. Because must have is like the thing that you really think is the thing that probably happened the most. It's still conjecture. It's still speculative, adjective form. But it's the thing that is probably closer to what you really are, is what your best guess is. Okay? We'll look at this more. Don't worry. We'll keep talking about this. He must have been eaten by that dinosaur. Now, do you understand speculation and conjecture yet? What I'd like you to do, if you don't, is think of a detective. Could have, might have, may have, must have. It might have been the maid. It could have been the ex-wife. It may have been the chauffeur. But no, it must have been the butler. See, the way that detectives in movies and TV especially always have theories about what may have, could have, might have, or must have happened. Speculation. There's our detective again, Mr. Holmes. He says, He, in other words, that burglar, thief, robber, all words for the guy breaking into the house, right? He could have come in through that door. He might have come in through the secret tunnel. He may have come in through the hole in the wall. But no. He must have come in through the window. Which he did, right? We know, we saw. He must have come in through the window. Conjecture and speculation. Theories of what happened that we don't really know, right? Good. Now, what about would have and could have? Or should have, rather, and would have, excuse me. Should have and would have. Well, there are those big words, if and if only. If is probably the most important two-letter word in English. It's a word that is about how things would be, could be different if circumstances had been different. And people also, the phrase of regret is, oh, if only, if only I had known. I should have done this. If only I had done this. I would have done it if only. If. Do you understand? Let me give you an example. If I had known, I would have done everything differently. I should have been completely honest from the beginning. How many times have you heard people say that? I should have and I would have, the language of what's the word I'm looking for? Besides regret, of knowing something too late. I should have. It's the language of hindsight. That's the word I was looking for. Hindsight is like in retrospect, is knowing something now that you didn't know when you had to make the relevant decision, right? I should have, I would have done it differently, adverb, differently. I would have done it differently if I had only known then what I know now. Okay. Now, the structure of these perfect modals, of the sentences that include them. We start with our subject or subject pronoun, right? Plus the modal auxiliary, plus the helper verb have, right? Plus the past participle of whatever verb we're going to use. Let's look at some examples. I would have worked. I would have worked. Subject pronoun I, modal would, helper verb have, past participle worked. I would have worked. We might have won. We might have won. If I had hit that ball instead of striking out, we might have won, for example. Let's take a look at another one. Subject pronoun she could have sung. She could have sung. Sung is the past participle of what verb? Do you know? It's the past participle of sing. So, she was there that night. She could have sung, for example. Gee, there was nobody to sing. Yeah, but she could have sung. Possibility. How about this? They may have arrived. Have they arrived yet? I don't know. They may have arrived. Let's look. Right? Possibility. They may have arrived. Let's go check their cabin. So, would have, could have, should have, may have, might have, must have. What about these phrases in relaxed American speech? Would have becomes woulda. Could have, you'll often hear as coulda. She could have sung. Should have becomes shoulda. Hey, you should have been there. It was such a great night. May have, maya. Oh, you may have seen him in some movie or other. You know, my father was an actor. You may have seen him in a movie. Maya. This is going to be very helpful when you're really talking to Americans about this stuff, because you'll hear this all the time. It might have happened that way, but it might have happened some other way. He must have come in through the window. He must have come in through the window. He must have come in through the window. He might have come in through the door. He may have come in through the secret tunnel. I should have caught him. I could have if I'd thought that earlier. I would have if I'd been there. Relaxed speech for these perfect modals using have. So now I think it's time to try some exercises. Okay? Let's start with this. Is it possibility or speculation? I will read you the sentence, and then I want you to tell me if this is a use of the modal auxiliary verb as indicating a possibility or as speculation. If we'd planned it in advance, he could have swum to shore. Okay? If we had, right, if we'd planned it in advance, in other words, earlier, he could have swum, right? Past tense of swim, to shore. The shore is land, by the way. The ocean meets the shore. Shore is the beach, is the land next to the ocean. So, this, of course, is talking about a possibility, isn't it? Because it's a situation in which we're talking about what could have been different. If we'd planned it in advance, you know, he could have swum to shore. Let's take a look at another one. Our little fella up there. Who was watching the baby? He could have fallen and hurt himself. You know, you can hear a mother, you can see a mother coming into the room, and the baby's walking around on the coffee table, and she's going, who was watching the baby? He could have fallen and hurt himself. Is this a way of talking about a possibility, or is it a form of speculation? You tell me. Did you say possibility? You're right. It's a possibility that the baby could have fallen and hurt himself. Let's take a look at the next one. Where did he come from? He could have come here from outer space. Where did he come from? He could have come here from outer space. Now, is that possibility or speculation? Very good. It's speculation. We don't know where he came from, so we are going to conjecture. We are going to theorize. We are going to think about ways that, are answers to this question. He could have come here from outer space. That is my speculation. Let's do another one. This is kind of fun, isn't it? Oh, here he is. There's this guy, with his shoes in his hand. Where was he all night? He might have been out dancing. Where was he all night? He might have been out dancing. What do you think? Possibility? Speculation? Good. It's also an example of speculation, isn't it? Why do we know that? Because we don't have any idea where he was last night. We only know that he's coming in this morning holding his shoes in his hand, because obviously he does not want, I would imagine, his wife to hear him. He might have been out dancing. Speculation. We don't know. More important, his wife doesn't know. Oh, Mr. Maxwell. Why didn't Renee answer the phone? Says Mr. Maxwell. Well, John maybe, or somebody says to him, she may have been on a break. Why didn't Renee answer the phone? She may have been on a break. Possibility? Speculation. Do we know where Renee was? No, it's speculation. It's a theory to explain something that we don't know. How about this one? That might have been the most beautiful sunset I've ever seen. Listen to that one again. That might have been the most beautiful sunset I've ever seen. Another way you'll hear this a lot. That might have been the most beautiful sunset I've ever seen. Is that possibility or speculation? Well, it's really possibility. It's sort of like, maybe it was the most beautiful sunset I've ever seen. Now, there was a sunset that I saw 5 years earlier when I was on my trip to Hawaii, and maybe that was the more beautiful sunset. But, possibly this might have been the most beautiful sunset I've ever seen. See? It's just a way of discussing, gee, that might have been the most beautiful one ever. Okay? It's a possibility. Oh, here's our detective again, looking through his magnifying glass. How did he get out of the house, is the question. He must have escaped through the kitchen. How did he get out of the house? Well, Mrs. Johnson was in the living room, and the maid was in the pantry. So there's only one way to get out without being seen. He must have escaped through the kitchen. Possibility or speculation? Right. Speculation. He is speculating. He is conjecturing about how this person escaped without being seen. It must have been through the kitchen. Now, let's do another exercises using if statements. Using if statements that are linked to questions of what might have been. Okay? Let me give you an example of what I mean by this. If I had gone to medical school, that's our if statement, right? Or our if clause. If I had gone to medical school, comma. And now, we're going to use in the what might have been clause of the sentence. We are going to use the modal auxiliary would and the verb become. Okay? If I had gone to medical school, I would have become a doctor. If I had gone to medical school, subject pronoun I, modal auxiliary would, helper verb have, past participle of the verb become is become a doctor, of course, because medical school is where you learn how to be a doctor. If I had gone to medical school, I would have become a doctor. Now, let's have you try some. Okay, so let's take a look at the yellow clause, which is the if one, right? If I had had the money, notice, by the way, what tense are these in? These if clauses are all, in this case, in the past perfect, right? If I had had the money, There's the Taj Mahal. And it's saying use could and use the verb phrase take a trip. And then we're going to figure out from the picture where we're going to take that. We could, where, no, I don't want to say that. Where the trip would be to. If I had had the money, okay, what's the subject pronoun? Right, I. And what's our modal auxiliary? Good. Could have. Now, past participle of the verb phrase take a trip. Taken a trip, and then where? To India. If I had had the money, I could have taken a trip to India. That would have been what? Possible. Let's try another one. If we had known more about cars. So now, use could and fixed. Okay? If we had known more about cars, and then whatever the part of the car is we see in the picture. So, what's our subject pronoun going to be, do you think? If we had known more about cars, we, good, modal, and helper verb. Could have, good. What's the verb going to be? Good. Fixed, which is the past participle of fix. We could have fixed, and then fill in the blank with the part of the car we see in the picture here. Okay? We could have fixed the engine. If we had known more about cars, we could have fixed the engine. Now, let's see this one. If the fireman had arrived earlier. Oh, if only the fireman had arrived earlier. We're going to use what? Might and put out. If the fireman had arrived earlier. What? Right. So, if the fireman had arrived earlier, our subject pronoun is going to be they. Good. Third person plural. Firemen, they. If the firemen had arrived earlier, they, modal auxiliary, might have, perfect modal really with the have, right? They might have past participle of that verb that's down there in yellow. They might have, good, put out. And what might they have put out? What is the direct object of put out? If the firemen had arrived earlier, they might have put out, what else? The fire. If the firemen had arrived earlier, they might have put out the fire. The if clause uses the past perfect tense, and then the perfect modal is used for the, sometimes it's called the unreal conditional, I think. It's the unreal. In other words, the situation that didn't happen because the if thing didn't, never came to pass. If the firemen had put out the fire, they might have, had arrived earlier, they might have put out the fire. If Mozart had lived longer, blank, more great music. And we're going to use would and right. If Mozart had lived longer, he died at 35, right? Blank, 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 more great music. Now fill in that phrase. If Mozart had lived longer, more great music. Okay, what is it? He would have written more great music. You see that? If Mozart had lived longer, he would have written more great music. It's actually a little more definite than might. Might have, may have, even must have, are all speculative. But this is a statement, you know. Like, we know that Mozart was such a genius. It's not like he wouldn't have written great, like everything after, everything else that he'd written would suddenly have not have been great. So we know he would have written more great music. There's definiteness in that. If he hadn't been so busy, here's this guy. He's a busy man, clearly, isn't he? If he hadn't been so busy, use would and go. And then the picture tells us where where the go would be to. Okay. If he hadn't been so busy, subject pronoun. He. What's our modal? Perfect modal. Would have, right. Past participle of that verb down there. He would have gone and fill in the blank. If he hadn't been so busy, he would have gone where? Can we see from the picture below us there? If he hadn't been so busy, he would have gone to the baseball game. If Donna had known John was coming straight home from work, blank, 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 blank him to bring home some tomatoes. Use might and ask. If Donna had known John was coming straight home from work, blank, 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 him to bring home some tomatoes. Blank, 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 him. Excuse me, too many blanks. Blank, 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 him to bring home some tomatoes. Okay, use might and ask. Subject pronoun, of course, is going to relate to Donna. If Donna had known John was coming straight home from work, good, him to bring home some tomatoes. She might have asked him to bring home some tomatoes. If Donna had known John was coming straight home from work, she might have asked him to bring home some tomatoes. Okay. If you knew in advance about the court date, says someone, blank, 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 blank me about it. Okay? Use should and tell. If you knew in advance about the court date, blank, 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 blank me about it. Okay? Use should and tell. Here's an example where we are able to use a simple past verb in the if clause. If you knew in advance about the court date, blank, 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 blank me about it. Obviously, this is someone who's angry. Should is often used by angry people, isn't it? You should have told me. Gave it away. If you knew in advance about the court date, you should have told me about it. Now, I shouldn't have told you the answer before, I had you tell me, should I? Well, we can get tied up into such knots with these perfect modals, because we're imperfect people. That's another story. Now, our last exercise, we're going to talk about relaxed and careful speech using these perfect modals. Let's take a look. If I could have been there, I would have been. This is the careful way to pronounce it. If I could have been there, I would have been. The British would say, if I could have been there, I would have been. That's another story, too. If I could have been there, I would have been. Now, what's the relaxed American pronunciation of that? If I could have been there, I would have been. If I could have been there, I would have been. If I could have been there, I would have been. Now, see how that would be hard to understand if you weren't prepared for it, right? That would be hard to understand if you weren't prepared for it. If I could have been there, if I could have been there, I would have been. I would have been. Let's try another one. She might have gone with them if they would have promised to be home by midnight. Okay, careful speech. She might have gone with them if they would have promised to be home by midnight. So, now you say that relaxed. She, gone with them if they, promised to be home by midnight. She might have gone with them if they would have promised to be home by midnight. Hey, she might have gone with them if they would have promised to be home by midnight. Let's try another one. They might have had a night or two in Paris, or perhaps it was Venice. I would have preferred London. Goes from speculation to, sort of possibility, right? They might have had a night or two in Paris, or perhaps it was Venice. I would have preferred London. Let's hear it relaxed. They had a night or two in Paris, or perhaps it was Venice. I preferred London. They might have had a night or two in Paris, or perhaps it was Venice. I would have preferred London, frankly, myself. Well, there we are. Those are the perfect modals. Now, I know this might have been a difficult lesson for you. I could have done it differently if that would have helped. But then you may not have understood any better than you do now. Should I have done it differently? Of course. If you understand this, I must not have done badly, must I? Thanks for joining me here to learn your English at LEI. See you in Unit 2.